She was just riding her bike, that's what they all said. A quiet afternoon, a peaceful street, a little girl on two wheels, and then silence. No scream, no struggle, no goodbye. In the summer of 1993, 9-year-old Lily Carson disappeared while riding her red bicycle just outside her home in Ontario. For 30 years, her family searched, hoped, mourned, and wondered how someone could vanish without a trace, in broad daylight. And then, in 2023, a discovery was made. Not across the country, not in a forest, but just 3 meters from her front yard. What was buried all this time? How did no one see it? And what really happened to Lily that day? Before we dive deep into this emotional cold case, let me ask you one thing. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or province below in the comments, Canada, USA, or anywhere else. And if you believe every child deserves to be found, hit the like button now. Comment the word, remember, to help this story reach more people who still hold hope. Because sometimes, even after decades, the truth rises from the dirt. In 1993, Lily Carson was the kind of child everyone in the neighborhood knew by name. Bright, polite, and endlessly curious. She had just turned 9 and was enjoying the first weeks of summer vacation in her quiet suburb outside Hamilton, Ontario. Her parents, Derek and Marianne, were both teachers, disciplined but warm, and their street was the kind of place where windows stayed open and kids played freely until dinner time. That's why July 17th didn't feel dangerous. It felt ordinary. Lily had just eaten a peanut butter sandwich and asked her mother if she could ride her bike for a bit before sunset. Marianne said yes, as she always did. Lily pulled on her blue shirt with little yellow bears, slipped into her canvas shoes, and wheeled her red bicycle out of the garage. "Just stay on the block," her mom called after her. "I will," Lily shouted, already pedaling away. That was the last time anyone saw her. For the first 30 minutes, no one was worried. Then 45 passed. An hour. The sun dipped lower. Marianne stood on the porch, scanning the street. Derek drove slowly around the neighborhood. Nothing. No Lily. No bike. No one remembered seeing her turn a corner. No one had seen her fall, or talk to a stranger, or scream. The only thing anyone remembered was a dog barking once, sharply, then silence. The police were called by 7:15 p.m. By 8, flashlights lit the streets. Neighbors joined in. Volunteers walked in rows. The woods behind the houses were combed. Backyard sheds were opened. Basements checked. And yet, nothing. The next morning, her photo was on every light pole. It showed her smiling, slightly off-center, with bangs and missing teeth. The red bike was described in detail. Training wheels removed, one handlebar grip slightly torn, and a sticker of a cartoon duck on the back fender. Helicopters joined the search. Dogs were brought in. Rivers nearby were dragged. People across Ontario watched the news and locked their doors. Some said it must have been someone she knew. Others whispered of a drifter spotted at a gas station days earlier. No trace of Lily. No sign of the bike. No witnesses. No ransom. No explanation. Derek and Marianne stayed in that same house. They couldn't bring themselves to move. Lily's room remained untouched. Her closet still held summer clothes for a season she never got to finish. Every year on July 17th, they lit a candle on the front step. By the 10th anniversary, only a few people still showed up. By the 20th, it was just the two of them. But in 2023, something changed. A construction crew hired to redo a neighbor's patio discovered something strange while removing tree roots between the houses. Stuck in the soil, tangled in roots and half-buried, was the frame of a small red bicycle. Rusted, faded, unmistakable. It was found less than 3 meters from the Carsons' backyard fence, hidden all along, just beneath their feet. Forensics arrived within the hour. The red bicycle, once bright and full of life, was now a skeleton of rust and dirt. It had been swallowed by the earth, wedged between thick tree roots as if nature itself had tried to hide it. But there was no mistaking it. The torn handlebar grip, the cartoon duck sticker, now barely visible under grime. It was Lily's bike. After 30 years of nothing, the case was no longer cold. It was burning. Detectives roped off the area. Soil samples were taken. A full excavation was ordered for the section of ground between the Carson's house and the neighbor's yard. Derek stood silently behind the police tape, staring at the patch of earth where his daughter's bicycle had been buried for decades. Marianne sat on the porch, clutching Lily's old sweater like it had just been taken off the hanger. The neighborhood buzzed with disbelief. How could it have been there all along? Everyone had walked past that spot hundreds, maybe thousands of times. Kids had ridden over it. Dogs had sniffed it. Landscapers had trimmed the grass above it. And no one had seen a thing. News vans returned to the street for the first time in years. The headline was everywhere. Missing girl's bicycle found after 30 years, just meters from home. The discovery sparked a storm of questions. If the bike was there, where was Lily? Could she be buried nearby, too? Was this where it happened? And who could have hidden it without anyone noticing? Detective Helen Rowe, a veteran investigator from Toronto's cold case unit, was brought in to lead the new search. She met with Derek and Marianne privately. They were older now, faces worn by decades of unanswered grief, but still sharp, still hoping. Rowe asked them everything. Again, what Lily was wearing, what time she left, who was on the street, every detail, no matter how small. Then she turned to the neighbors. House by house, person by person. She found a pattern. In 1993, the house next door, the one where the bike was found, had been a rental. Tenants had come and gone. But in the summer of Lily's disappearance, it had been occupied by a man named Gerald Naylor, a quiet man, mid-40s, who worked nights and mostly kept to himself. Some neighbors remembered him vaguely. Others had forgotten his name entirely. He had moved out shortly after Lily went missing. Said he was sick of the noise and media, one neighbor recalled. Detective Rowe dug deeper. Gerald Naylor had never been a suspect. He had an alibi, a receipt from a gas station 30 kilometers away, time-stamped within the hour. Lily vanished. But that was before they knew the bike had never left the neighborhood. Before they knew it was buried right beside the house he once lived in. Rowe reopened his file. Naylor had died in 2011. No wife, no kids, no family to question. But his past suddenly became relevant again, and buried within it might be the answers no one thought would ever come to light. Detective Rowe requested access to every record available on Gerald Naylor. What she found was unsettling. In 1991, 2 years before Lily's disappearance, Naylor had been questioned in a separate case involving a missing teenager in Sudbury. No charges were filed and his alibi held, but the details were eerily familiar. A young girl, gone without a trace, last seen near her home. Rowe dug further. Naylor had lived in 5 different towns over 10 years, always renting, always moving within months of a local incident involving a child. Nothing ever stuck to him. No arrests, no fingerprints, no complaints. Just a trail of coincidences too precise to ignore. She brought in a forensic anthropologist to begin soil testing in the neighboring property. Ground-penetrating radar revealed several anomalies beneath the surface. Small pockets, irregular density, disturbances in the earth. The digging began immediately. Over the next 48 hours, the excavation team uncovered bones. Tiny bones. At first, they believed them to be animal remains, but further testing confirmed the worst. Human. The femur of a child. A fragment of skull. Then, buried deeper, pieces of a blue fabric, faded and torn. When shown to Marianne Carson, she broke down completely. It was Lily's favorite shirt, the one with yellow bears. The forensic team worked day and night. More fragments were uncovered. Shoes, canvas, a child's tooth. It was Lily. Hidden in the ground, less than 3 meters from where she had last been seen, her body had been resting in silence for 3 decades. The investigation shifted focus, no longer just a search for answers, but a reconstruction of a crime. How had Gerald Naylor managed to bury a child so close without anyone seeing? Why had no one questioned him more deeply at the time? Rowe reviewed the original case files and was shocked to discover that the backyard of the rental property had never been searched in 1993. The reason? A clerical error. The property had been mistakenly listed as vacant during the initial canvass. Because of that, no cadaver dogs had been brought to that side of the lot. It had been overlooked, forgotten, just like Lily. In the years that followed, new tenants came and went. A shed had been built over part of the burial site, later torn down. Trees had grown. Roots had twisted through the soil like fingers, wrapping around the bicycle, the bones, the truth. And all the while her parents had lived next door, raised candles, prayed, grieved, without knowing that their daughter had never left. She had been home the entire time. As news of the discovery spread, the public reaction was intense. Shock, outrage, heartbreak, but also guilt. People asked how this could have happened, how a child could vanish and be buried in a neighborhood where everyone thought they were safe. And Detective Rowe, flipping through pages of overlooked reports and missed opportunities, quietly asked the same thing. Gerald Naylor had taken secrets to his grave, but Detective Rowe wasn't ready to let them stay buried. With Lily's remains confirmed, she ordered a full forensic sweep of every property Naylor had ever rented in Ontario. The list was long. The pattern was haunting. In at least 3 cases, the timeline of his moves overlapped with unsolved reports of missing girls. Nothing had ever connected him, until now. Back in Truro, Lily's case became national news again. Her photo reappeared on screens across Canada, now paired with headlines like "Truth Found Beneath Her Feet" and "30 Years of Silence Shattered." Reporters camped outside the Carson home. Marianne and Derek declined every interview. They had waited 30 years for answers. Now they just wanted time to breathe. In private, they held a small service. No cameras, no announcements. Just them, close family, and a tiny white box of earth from the backyard. Inside it, a small ribbon from Lily's hair and the cloth fragment of her shirt. It was their way of saying goodbye. Finally, with truth, instead of uncertainty. Meanwhile, the investigation expanded. A warrant was issued to exhume Gerald Naylor's ashes from a columbarium in Ottawa. Not for evidence, but for closure. His DNA was matched to fibers found on Lily's clothing. It was undeniable now. He had taken her, buried her, lived next door, and no one had seen a thing. The police interviewed dozens of people who had lived on the street back then. Many remembered Naylor as quiet or a bit strange. One man recalled seeing him digging in the yard at night the week Lily vanished, but he hadn't thought much of it at the time. "Everyone was tense back then," he said. "We were all doing weird things." Rowe didn't blame them. She blamed the system, the oversight, the assumption that evil always comes from far away, never from right next door. As the investigation continued, the RCMP announced they would be reopening 3 other cold cases involving missing girls with similar profiles from the 1980s and 1990s. Naylor was now considered a person of interest in all of them. The Carsons were kept informed, but they stayed quiet. Their daughter's case was no longer just about them. It had become something bigger, a reckoning, a mirror held up to a system that had failed. In late August, a bench was installed at the edge of the Carson property, overlooking the patch of earth where the bicycle was found. On it, a plaque read, "In memory of Lily Carson, loved, missed, found." The bench became a place where neighbors stopped to reflect. Children left flowers. Some left drawings of bikes and hearts. One day, someone placed a note under a small rock. It said, You were here all along, and now we know. That truth, heavy and humbling, was what remained after the search ended. Lily was finally home. The story could have ended with closure. But for Detective Rowe, something didn't sit right. Lily Carson's murder had been solved, yes, but how could Gerald Naylor have hidden a body on a bicycle so close, so boldly, with no one seeing him? And more importantly, had he acted alone? Rowe returned to the original files from 1993, looking for anything that might have been ignored. One report stood out. A neighbor, 17 at the time, had told officers she saw a man pushing something wrapped in a tarp behind the fence late at night, but her statement was never followed up. No name, no second interview. Just a note scribbled. Unreliable witness, highly emotional. Rowe tracked the woman down. Her name was Dana Mitchell, now 47, living in Kingston. When Rowe arrived at her door, Dana opened it slowly, eyes wide. "I always thought someone would come back," she said. But no one ever did. Over coffee, Dana told the full story. On the night Lily vanished, she had snuck out to meet a boy from her school. While waiting near her backyard, she saw Naylor dragging something wrapped in dark fabric from his shed. He looked around nervously, then began digging. "I didn't want to believe what I saw," Dana admitted. "And when the police didn't follow up, I figured maybe I imagined it." But she hadn't. Her memory matched the burial site exactly. The timeline fit. And it raised a chilling question. If Dana saw him from her yard, and his house was that exposed, why wasn't he more careful? Rowe considered a new possibility. What if Naylor had help? Or worse, what if someone else knew and said nothing? She began re-interviewing everyone from the street. One name kept coming up, Arthur Bellamy, the landlord who owned the house Naylor rented. At the time, he lived 2 doors down. He had keys to every unit. And in 1995, just 2 years after Lily's death, he sold the property suddenly and left town. When Rowe pulled Bellamy's records, a pattern emerged. He had owned multiple rental homes, 3 of which had been near open missing persons cases in the 1990s. Coincidence? Maybe. But Rowe no longer believed in coincidences. Bellamy was now 78, living in a care home in northern Ontario. He was frail, but lucid. When asked about Naylor, his face darkened. "I don't like to talk about him," he said. He brought darkness with him. When Rowe pressed further, asking if he'd ever been in the shed, if he'd ever noticed anything unusual, Bellamy paused, then whispered, "I thought I heard crying one night, but I didn't go. I didn't want to know." That sentence echoed in Rowe's mind for days. I didn't want to know. The silence of a neighbor, the overlooked witness, the box unchecked on a police report. 30 years of missed chances, layered one over another like the soil that had hidden Lily's body. It was no longer just about solving a case. It was about exposing every silence that allowed it to happen. Detective Rowe now had more than a killer's name. She had a narrative, one shaped by silence, avoidance, and buried truths. Gerald Naylor may have been the one who took Lily Carson, but the system, the neighborhood, and even the well-intentioned had each played a role in keeping her hidden for so long. And Rowe wasn't going to let that pattern repeat. She reopened interviews with every officer who had worked the original 1993 case. Many were retired, some admitted mistakes. One admitted that back then, missing children were often categorized by likely runaways or domestic situations within hours. Lily's case had narrowly avoided that label only because of her age and the family's reputation in the town. Another officer confessed that the rental house's backyard had been skipped because we had limited manpower and thought she was taken far away, not buried next door. Rowe didn't point fingers, but she took notes. All of it would be part of her final report, an honest, painful autopsy of how justice had been delayed for 30 years. Meanwhile, the town of Truro was undergoing its own reckoning. A public town hall was held in the local community center. Hundreds showed up, some to mourn, some to confess guilt, and some to simply understand how something like this could have happened under their watch. Marianne Carson attended, standing quietly in the back, her face unreadable. Derek stayed home. He couldn't face the crowd. The mayor opened the event with a statement: "We failed Lily Carson." Not only in 1993, but every year after, when we stopped asking, stopped searching, and started forgetting. A mural was commissioned near the park where the children now played. It showed a young girl on a red bicycle, her hair blowing in the wind. Below it, a line: "She rode into our hearts and never left." But Roe wasn't finished yet. In the course of her digging, she discovered something deeply troubling. A man named Tom Radley, a friend of Gerald Naylor from the early 90s, had been living under a new name in Alberta. He had a record for breaking and entering and had once served time for assault. In 1992, he had visited Naylor in Truro for 2 weeks, leaving town just days before Lily disappeared. No one had ever questioned him. His name was never in the case file. When Roe contacted him, he denied everything, said he barely remembered Naylor, claimed to be out of town the week Lily vanished. But when pressed, he slipped. He referred to the Carson house by its old paint color, a detail that hadn't existed in public photos since the early 2000s. Roe requested a warrant to obtain Radley's DNA. If a second person had helped move or bury Lily's body, there was a chance some trace remained, on the fabric, on the bicycle, even in the soil. The test results were pending, but the feeling in Roe's gut was clear. This wasn't just one man's crime, it was a chain. And the next link was about to break. The DNA results came back in under 2 weeks. The lab's report was clear. Tom Radley's DNA was present on 2 items recovered from the burial site. One fragment of Lily's shirt and the rear tire of the bicycle. It was a match, and it changed everything. Roe contacted Radley again, this time not as a friendly conversation, but with a warrant in hand. He was arrested in Edmonton without incident, though the look on his face betrayed the fear of a man whose past had finally caught up with him. In interrogation, Radley denied involvement at first, claimed the DNA must have been transferred accidentally. Maybe he touched the bike years ago, maybe Lily borrowed it from someone else. But he knew it wouldn't hold. Confronted with the evidence and the mounting pressure of public outrage, Radley finally spoke. What he said was worse than Roe expected. According to Radley, Gerald Naylor had become obsessed with Lily the moment they moved into the rental property. He would watch her from the side window, take notes, record what time she played outside. Radley claimed Naylor told him he had a plan to scare her, just to see how people would react. But on that July afternoon, the plan spiraled. Naylor lured Lily into the shed with a puppy, one he had borrowed from a neighbor, promising to return it later. Radley said he wasn't there when it happened, but when he arrived that evening, Lily was already unconscious, her head bleeding. Naylor panicked. Radley helped him bury her. "I didn't want to," he said, but he said if I told anyone, I'd be next. Roe didn't buy every word, but the DNA didn't lie. Radley was charged as an accessory to murder and unlawful disposal of a body. Naylor, though long dead, was named officially as the primary suspect in Lily Carson's kidnapping and death. The case, after 30 years, was finally closed. But justice, as Roe knew well, was never clean. News of Radley's arrest rippled across the country. Talk shows debated his sentence. True crime podcasts dissected his statements. The Carson family stayed silent. They had no interest in the noise, only the stillness. A press conference was held by the RCMP. Detective Roe stood at the podium, tired but resolute. "This case," she said, "is not just about solving one crime. It's about remembering the cost of assumptions, of silence, of closing a file too soon." Lily's name was now etched in more than just stone. It was in policies being rewritten across Ontario, in new training courses for detectives, in the minds of every parent who once believed their street was safe by default. and in the voice of every officer now reminded to double-check, to question everything, and to keep looking, even when the trail feels cold. Because sometimes what you're searching for is right beneath your feet. The summer of 2024 felt different in Truro. The shadows that had hovered over the Carson home for 3 decades had lifted, but what remained wasn't peace. It was weight, a solemn stillness. A town permanently marked by the truth that had taken too long to surface. Marianne and Derek Carson rarely spoke to the press, but when they did, it was in carefully chosen words. "Closure is a myth," Derek said softly in an interview with CBC. "You don't close a wound like this. You learn to live around it." Marianne spent her mornings in the garden, pulling weeds, trimming the roses. The same garden that for years bloomed just meters from where her daughter had been buried. The irony wasn't lost on her. "We were growing things," she once told a neighbor, "on top of where we lost everything." Lily's room had changed. Not emptied, not preserved in time, but transformed. It now held books about justice, shelves of flowers and drawings left by children from the local school. Letters came in from across the country, people who had lost someone, people who never gave up hope. They said Lily's story gave them strength, that even in death she had become a voice. Elsewhere, Detective Helen Rowe was being honored. Awards, recognitions, media coverage, but she accepted them with quiet grace. To her, it wasn't a victory. It was a correction. "We got there too late," she said, "but we got there." She now led a task force focused solely on reinvestigating other cold cases from the 80s and 90s involving missing children. Her office wall held photos, not just of Lily, but of many still waiting to be found. "We owe them better," she said. "All of them." The name Gerald Naylor would never be forgotten in Truro, but it wouldn't be spoken with fear. It would be used in lectures, in training rooms, as a case study in evil hiding in plain sight. And Tom Radley? He would spend the rest of his life behind bars, not just for what he did, but for what he allowed. For the silence, for the shovel in his hand, for the 30 years he walked free while the Carsons grieved beside their daughter's grave without knowing it existed. In October, the local elementary school unveiled a small plaque beneath the mural of Lily on her bike. It read, "In her memory, we ask questions, we pay attention, we protect each other." The Carson house remained. They thought of moving once, but then decided not to. "This is where she is," Marianne said. "This is where we found her. We're not going anywhere." And in that same backyard where silence once reigned, laughter returned. Neighborhood kids played again, rode their bikes. A little girl with long brown hair circled the driveway one afternoon and paused at the bench by the tree. She looked at the plaque, then up at the house. And she smiled. In the decades following her disappearance, Lily Carson had become a face on a poster, a name whispered in cautionary tales, a headline brought back every few years when anniversaries returned. But after the truth was uncovered, after the dirt was lifted, the names revealed and the silence broken, she became something more. A symbol, not just of loss, but of persistence, of a family that refused to move on without answers, of a detective who didn't accept cold as final, of a town that learned the price of forgetting. The final report from the RCMP Cold Case Unit was published in early 2025. It spanned over 700 pages, documenting the missteps, missed leads, and hard-earned revelations that finally brought Lily home. It was sent to every provincial police department in Canada, marked as required reading. But the legacy didn't stop with the report. A foundation was created in Lily's name. The Lily Carson Trust, dedicated to helping families of long-term missing children. It offered counseling, legal support, and funding for private investigations when official ones stalled. Derek and Marianne were named honorary directors. "We don't want another child's story to end in soil," Marianne said at the launch event. That same year, A national conference on child safety and investigative reform was held in Ottawa. Detective Rowe opened the event with a quiet but powerful speech. "We didn't find her because we had better technology," she said. "We found her because someone kept looking. Because a mother never stopped checking the mailbox. Because a neighbor remembered the sound of a shovel. Because the truth doesn't rot. It waits." Teachers across Canada began using Lily's story in classrooms, not to scare, but to teach. About observation, about courage, about what to do when something doesn't feel right. Her photo, once a plea for help, now became a symbol of awareness and resilience. The mural in Truro faded slowly under sun and rain, but it was retouched every spring by local artists and volunteers. It became tradition, a way to say, "We still remember." Every July 17th, families gathered at the park. They lit candles, rode their bikes, told stories. The date no longer marked the day she was taken, but the day her name changed everything. In their home, Marianne and Derek lived quietly, no longer waiting, but still remembering. Some nights, Marianne would walk to the bench, sit beneath the stars and whisper, "We found you, Lily. We found you." And in that soft breeze that danced through the trees, in the laughter of children playing nearby, in the rhythm of wheels on pavement, something always answered back. Not in words, but in presence. Lily's story didn't end in the ground. It grew through it. It bloomed in those who remembered. And now, it would never be forgotten.